Like the Army website, it's got that on there. It lays the foundation, and then I'll sprinkle some in there, but for the most part, this is kind of, a lot of it's related to you as an organization. All right, and I'm gonna have to try to work on the speed and stuff, but I'll get it fine. I'll end up off the cuff, probably walking around anyway at the end, so you never know with me.
Just don't
But-
trip over all this. I don't know where all that came from.
That's probably a good way to keep me in
But
one
be
spot.
careful.
That's probably good for me. Before I begin tonight, I'm going to start with a question. Why do people choose to serve, even knowing the cost? That question has followed Americans from the field of the Revolution to the battlefields that we fight on today. It followed young farmers who stood at Lexington and Concord, not knowing if they were going to survive the day. It followed generations of Americans who left their homes, their families, and their certainty behind because they believed something larger than themselves was worth protecting. And in many ways, choosing to serve is what brought us here today. Thank you for having me. This is the fourth time I've had the honor of speaking to the Doors of American Revolution, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. You're an organization that understands the meaning of service and legacy better than most. You preserve the memory of those who chose service when the outcome was uncertain. And as we approach the 250th birthday of the United States, your work reminds us that freedom was not inevitable. It was chosen, and it must continue to be chosen. Because nations do not endure with laws and borders long. They endure through memory, sacrifice, and service passed on from one generation to the next. 250 years ago, ordinary people made an extraordinary decision. They risked safety for liberty. They chose responsibility over comfort. They didn't know whether their cause would succeed. But they did have a strong belief, and it was real simple. They believed in liberty and freedom, and that was worth risking everything for. That belief became a nation, and the descendants of those patriots are sitting in this room. It's also meaningful that we gather on President's Day. For many Americans, it's just a long weekend, but its original purpose was to honor leadership rooted in service. Beginning with George Washington, a man who could have held power his entire life, but instead he chose to step away at the end of his second term. That decision shaped the character of this nation. I don't know why I got choked up on that part. It's gonna be a good ride. I feel it. It established the idea that leadership in America is not about holding power, but about stewarding it and passing it on. Every president since has inherited that burden in separate ways. They're guiding the nation through war, uncertainty, division, and change. And while history may debate individual decisions, the office itself represents continuity. It reminds us that America endures not because of any single individual, but because each generation accepts the responsibility to lead, to serve, and then pass the nation forward. For those of us who served in uniform, that idea matters deeply. The oath we take is not to a person, but to the Constitution, to the enduring principles first defended by the revolutionary generation whose legacy you preserve. I served 18 years as an Army Ranger and a Special Operations Combat Medic. 5 of those years were in Iraq and Afghanistan. And like many in my generation, I experienced both the pride and the cost of war. I was wounded on 2 occasions. I lost friends that I still think about every day. In fact, I named my youngest daughter after one of those heroes. The second time I was wounded came as I rushed to treat casualties from a massive car bomb that hit the front gate of our compound. As I got to the first soldier to start working, an enemy fighter dressed in an Afghan army, I don't know where he got it, he stole it, and it got within probably 40 to 50 foot of me and detonated a suicide vest. Well, I woke up 4 days later in the hospital in Landstuhl. The damage done would force the Army to retire me way earlier than I had planned. But for 250 years, Americans had chose to serve in harm's way and take the fight to the enemy. We didn't fight because we loved war, but because we loved what stood behind us. We served because we understood that freedom is not self-sustaining. Every generation must decide whether it will simply inherit America or it's going to help preserve it. As a Ranger, I served and led men from every background imaginable. Different hometowns, different politics, different faiths. But once the mission started, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the person to your right and your left, that you could trust them. And that idea of shared responsibility is not just a military concept, that it's American. The revolution was not won by soldiers alone. It was sustained by families, by women who carried enormous burdens at home, who endured uncertainty and loss while believing in a future that they may never see. Your organization continues to do that same work today, ensuring that the story does not fade. My first 4 years in the Army as a Ranger, I also went to Special Operations Sniper School. In that role, I deployed to Kosovo. This is one of my favorite deployments. I say my favorite, if you got a favorite. It was my only time in the military where I actually did just my job. That was it. Nothing outside. I did my job. Unfortunately, that job was extremely difficult. I wish I had threw something else in to break up the craziness, but it was during the bombing campaign. I did the sniper operations, which was just to disrupt enemy operations. A sniper's primary objective is to deliver precision long-range fire on selected targets without detection. That's people or equipment. In addition to that, I did what's called painting targets. I used an infrared laser that was attached to the end of my sniper rifle and identified specific targets, got on the horn with the aircraft in the sky, and they would come over, shoot a bomb or a rocket. It would literally hit my laser and take it right to the whatever it was blowing up. And I just sat back and watched the fireworks. And in Kosovo, it was a lot of oil refinery, a lot of madness. I was young. I just thought it was cool. I didn't have a concept necessarily that how dangerous it was. Just me and my spotter. I had no idea where the closest American was. But fortunately, I made it out of there, and I learned a lot from doing those missions back then. When you got to crawl for 2 or 3 days, and you ain't made it but about 5 miles, it's pure misery. It's not what it looks like on the movies. But when I switched over to the other side of the house and became a Special Operations Combat Medic, I was able to serve my unit in a dual role now, because I was now a medic with a Ranger tab, all this special skills training. I was highly trained in infantry tactics, and I was already commanding combat patrols. But when somebody got hit, I grabbed my medic bag and was responsible for preserving life now instead of taking it. During my career, I conducted combat operations in 4 different countries, and I saw courage in the ways that most people never have an opportunity to witness. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind. A young soldier continuing forward despite intense fear. A wounded soldier more concerned about his teammates than he is himself. Or a chaplain crawling through the gun battle to reach a wounded soldier just so he could pray with him. Those acts of selflessness will never make headlines. But it taught me something very important. It taught me that service was not about glory. It's that responsibility. Doing what needs to be done, even when it's easier and a lot safer to just walk away. There's a quote from General Douglas MacArthur that's always stayed with me. He said, "The soldier above all others prays for peace. For it is the soldier who must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war." That line rings true for anyone who's ever served in combat, for sure. The ones who have seen war most closely are often the ones who understand most deeply the value of peace. Not as an abstract idea, but as something hard-earned, something fragile that exists because others were willing to stand in harm's way and face certain death to preserve it. But if we're going to honestly talk about service, we got to talk about the cost too. When Americans think about sacrifice, they often think about the battlefield. What many don't see is for some veterans, the hardest part begins when they get home. I want you to wrap your mind around these numbers. The last study that they had was June of 2021. From September 11th, 2001 to June 2021, the number of combat-related deaths was 7,121. The number of veteran suicides during that same period was 141,000.
Oh, my word.
Yeah.
I say those numbers all the time, and it never gets any easier. There are many reasons for these numbers. I'll share some of my observations. It's something that I think about and all day, every day. It's always in my head, and I strive to help the guy that's hiding it in some way. But you got the advances on the battlefield, our body armor, trucks, the up-armored Humvees, and then the stuff I could do on a battlefield as a medic blows any emergency room, trauma room, doc off the grid. And I can do it in the dark with night vision goggles on while riding down the road and being shot at. It's mind-blowing, the things that we're making it through. But that's played a huge role in soldier survivability. That's why that 7,000 number is not 100,000. But we're surviving through injuries now that would have been deadly any other time in history. We were not prepared for what happens to the human brain when they make it through this stuff, because it never happened. But living through these events has left many with physiological damage to the brains, as well as the psychological wounds. Another reason some veterans struggle lies in how the human mind adapts to war. In combat, your brain changes to keep you alive. Your brain adapts and puts you into a constant state of hyper-awareness. Every sound matters, every movement matters. Your nervous system becomes trained to anticipate danger before it appears. That heightened awareness is not weakness, it's key to your survival and to that of your men. But over time, your brain becomes stuck. It's stuck in that state, and it makes it real difficult to return to normal functions when you come home. You literally, it's to this day, I've been retired 10 years and I still have issues going in a restaurant. I've figured it out. I handle it, and it can be done, but it don't mean it's easy. But the same instincts that kept someone alive when they were under enemy fire can make ordinary life exceedingly difficult. Things like sitting in the bleachers at a football game or going to a concert can be too overwhelming to even attempt. Many veterans will always carry strong memories of loss or occasional feelings of overwhelming dread linked to traumatic experiences from the battlefield. These extreme emotions can appear without warning and manifest in multiple unusual ways.
Yeah.
And that leaves you not only depressed, but not even knowing why or how to fix it. On top of these issues, there's also a loss of structure and purpose. Military service, especially in combat units, that's what I can speak on. Purpose is unmistakable. When service ends, that clarity can disappear. The mission ends, the team scatters, and suddenly a person who spent years responsible for others is now trying to find where he even fits in, or if he does or not. But none of this means that these veterans or myself are broken. It means that we adapted exactly how we were trained to adapt, to survive extraordinary circumstances, but then we were immediately returned to ordinary ones. And we weren't without planning or any kind of training. One more part of the conversation is Americans' understanding of veterans comes primarily from media or Hollywood, movies or the news. Too often these portrayals fall into extremes on each side. You got the invincible hero or the permanently damaged veteran. There's no in between. But the truth is, most veterans live in between. They become parents, employees, business owners, mentors, and neighbors. They continue serving quietly in ways that rarely make the headlines, while stories of the ones committing crimes and blaming it on PTSD make the news. This muddies the waters. But when the public narrative becomes disconnected and incomplete, it creates distance. And distance becomes isolation for a veteran. And isolation is dangerous. When I left the Army, I struggled like many veterans do. I was dealing with serious physical injuries, 6 spinal surgeries, you name it, I had it. As well as the physiological issues that were made more complex due to a severe brain injury. I went through lengthy periods of darkness and into extreme isolation that I talked about earlier, and to a point where I almost became a statistic before I even knew what the statistics were. What sustained me was that I never stopped talking to God.
Yeah.
Yes.
With his help, I eventually realized that service doesn't end when military service does. It simply changes form. I recognized that it was up to me to find a new purpose and not somebody else's responsibility. I needed to focus on something that would allow me to use all the knowledge and experience that I had accumulated and share the lessons I learned. The obvious place to start was my 3 daughters. My focus became them. My purpose became doing whatever it took to give them the best version of me. Because that's the dad that they need and deserve. Because when I was 7, my 2-year-old little sister was sitting in my lap in my grandpa's van over in 8 Mile, Alabama. I don't know if y'all know about 8 Mile. It's a lot smaller than 8 miles. But we were driving down Lock Road in 8 Mile. Someone pulled out and hit us. My sister was thrown from the van and killed. My dad left the next day. This left my mom to raise my brother and me alone. She pushed through the deepest despair one could imagine, but she rose to her challenge. She worked up to 3 jobs at a time to support me and my brother, and I stepped up to take care of him. Was cooking him meals after school and taking care of things when she wasn't at the house. My mom was my hero, but I didn't have any example on how to be a good dad, especially to girls. I mean, the good Lord did this one right. I've spent a career surrounded by nothing but men in a job where there's no women. I don't even know what I was done with a boy though. I can't think of it playing out any other way. But I didn't have an example of a good dad. What I had were the lifelong effects of the trauma that was created by his absence and my knowledge and experience. So I gathered focus and pushed forward as their dad instead of as Sergeant First Class Lloyd. My wife Christy and my daughters continue to give me the strength and drive that I need to push through obstacles and continue to move forward in a positive way. I'm still a work in progress, but I'm very proud of that. I think everybody should be. Anybody who says they got it figured out is a liar and they're wrong. And I'll tell them. Today, my mission looks a little different. Along with being a husband and a father, I mentor high school athletes, young men preparing for military service, and veterans transitioning out. My goal is just to inspire others by sharing how I negotiated personal struggles and also the lessons that I learned throughout my life. These athletes are great. I played high school and in college football before I joined the Army and realized how much I learned on the football field helped me on the battlefield, helped me be a good soldier, and it was because I become a good teammate first. So, be a good teammate, and you'll become a good player or person by proxy. As America approaches its 250th birthday, I often think about what those original patriots would see if they looked at us now. Now, they'd see disagreement, they'd see challenges, but they'd also see endurance. They'd see a country still free to gather, to speak, to remember, and to argue while still being one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That endurance didn't happen by accident. It happened because generation after generation chose responsibility over comfort. The same principle that guided Washington when he stepped away from power, and the same principle that has guided American leadership ever since. The revolutionary generation handed us an unfinished project. Every soldier, every public servant, every citizen since has added just another chapter. President Ronald Reagan once reminded the nation that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed to them to do the same. That idea speaks directly to why organizations like the Doors of American Revolution matter, and why service in all its forms continues to matter. Freedom is not self-sustaining. It survives because each generation decides it's worth preserving, worth protecting, and worth passing on. As we approach America's 250th birthday, that responsibility comes more clear. The men and women of the revolutionary generation didn't create a finished nation, they created an opportunity. One that has been carried through sacrifice, leadership, and service ever since. Now it's our turn. Not to be perfect, but to be worthy of what we inherited. In Ranger Regiment, we often talk about leaving things better than we found them. Not because someone's watching or because you're gonna get praised, but because just the right thing to do. 250 years ago, Americans fought to create something new and uncertain. They had no idea whether it would last, but the fact that we're here today proves it did. And whether it lasts another 250 years will depend not only on one single generation, but on all of us continuing to serve in our own ways, leading when it's our turn, stepping aside when it's time, and passing the nation forward stronger than we received it. I'm going to circle back to a question I opened with. Why do some people choose to serve even knowing the cost? It's because someone before them served, and it's because someone after them deserves that same freedom. That's the legacy preserved by the DAR, and that is a responsibility we carry into America's next 250 years. Thank you, and God bless you, and God bless the United States. And this is my middle